Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
Oh my God, I gotta play you something. Before you and I do anything else today, I gotta play you something. Did you see what happened with Alex Trebek? Alex Trebek, Jeopardy, that Alex Trebek, moderated the Pennsylvania governor's debate. And get this, maybe you caught this, maybe you didn't, but he opened with a trivia question about the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. The race is between Democratic incumbent Tom Wolf and former state senator Scott Wagner, and Trebek asked Wolf the question about the Philadelphia Eagles. Check this out.
This year, shortly after the Super Bowl, you got a pretty positive reaction from the audience when you uttered the words, "Fly, Eagles, fly." And that started me thinking. So please, sir, tell me the name of the starting defensive lineman for the Eagles, who has won 2 consecutive Super Bowls, each one with a different team.
And I guess you're going to want me to put that in the form of a question.
Right now, there are people in this room who are sitting there saying, "What on earth is going on here?" You and Mr. Wagner have come here tonight to talk about politics and policies, and here comes Trebek straight out of left field with a question about football. That was unfair.
Now, a lot of people are mad that Alex Trebek let him off the hook without getting an answer. But here's the thing. He clearly didn't know, otherwise he would have blurted it out. And in doing this, Alex Trebek did something that made him my personal hero in that moment. He exposed politicians for being what they are. Folks that are going to pander. Folks that don't necessarily care about things that you care about, but will pretend to care about them because it'll keep them alive in the polls or the electoral race or whatever the hell it is they're engaged in for the next 10 minutes. Just as long as it takes to win, they'll figure out a way to act like they care. And if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know that I don't declare allegiance to any particular political party. I don't think it serves me, you, or the country when a person goes, "I'm straight ticket, blah," whatever blah happens to be. I think politicians would love to get you to register as a Republican or a Democrat or whatever the hell it is, because then they know they can kind of count on your vote. Well, I'm the Democratic candidate, clearly you're voting for me. Or I'm the Republican candidate, clearly you're voting for me, because you're not really going to do the research. You're just going to vote straight ticket, whatever the hell it is. And oh, by the way, to be involved in the presidential primaries, you have to be registered as something. So go ahead, register, remove critical thinking from our political process, make it easier for me to bilk you out of your money and win. And that would be great. K, thanks. So I don't believe in subscribing to one particular political party. And I don't believe that politicians, call me crazy, but I don't believe that politicians care the way they say they care. I don't believe politicians are the public servants they're supposed to be. I think, and again, call me a cockeyed cynicist, but I think oftentimes politicians care more about serving themselves than you. I mean, why else? Why else would a politician sign up for a job where you don't really answer to your boss? Yeah, you're a politician's boss. You put them in power. You put them in a position to make money off of your hard-earned tax dollars. Yet, in a weird kind of way, you answer to them, not the other way around. We've talked about this a lot. I can't think of another job where the person who cuts the check has to ask for an audience with you. If my boss goes, "Hey, AD, my office, 5 minutes," guess where I'm going to be in 5 minutes? In my boss's office, because ultimately they're the person that's responsible for my paycheck. They're the person that's responsible for my ability to eat, pay rent, things of that nature. And because the person who's responsible for my ability to pay my bills has told me to be a certain place at a certain time, guess what? I'm going to do that. Politics, This is the only gig I can think of where that doesn't apply. And I think if you're a politician, intrinsically, you want to seek out a role where you just kind of get to do what the hell you want to do. There's not the level of accountability that exists in other jobs because, well, the person cutting the check can't get you on the phone. And that's what I love about what Trebek did. That's why I'm talking about it before we talk about anything else today on the show. I hope it goes viral, and I hope it goes viral 1 trillion times over. Because what Alex Trebek did was expose the fact, and look, it's amazing. This expose is too generous of a word because it's a fact that we've known since the dawn of time, since the dawn of politics, since the dawn of our political process. We've known that politicians don't necessarily care about the things you care about in the way they say they do. Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's jobs, maybe it's business regulations, or maybe it's football. But politicians have a long, long history of acting like they give a crap. Because, well, they have a very slim portion of their career where they have to appear as though they're paying attention to what you've asked of them. And during that time, quite often, they're insincere and they pretend. We know this. We know this in our heart. It's always in the back of our mind. We know this. But occasionally, we need to be reminded. Politicians need to be kept on their toes. Politicians need to be reminded that we're smarter than they wish we were. And for that reason, I think the most brilliant moment in our political process in the year 2018 has come, bizarrely enough, courtesy of a Canadian game show host. Yeah. I'll take sticking it to the man for 1,000, Alex.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So if you were hanging out with the show yesterday, you might recall that we were talking a little bit about what it was that Mark Twain said. I paraphrase, of course, but the basic idea is that, according to Mark Twain, patriotism is supporting your country 100% of the time and your government when they deserve it. Now, as you and I were discussing yesterday, we appear to have gotten things twisted in 2018, where we're willing to swear allegiance to a side, to a political party, to government, to politicians, at the detriment of our country, which seems to be getting pulled further and further apart. And we talked about this rush that either side has to resolve the Kavanaugh situation. And, you know, I really don't understand it. And it really is confirmation to me that we've sort of lost sight of what it is to love your country, of what it is to be a patriot, only because, well, look, here's either side of the argument. On one side, there have been several accusers that have said Kavanaugh is not the kind of guy you want in this sort of position of authority. You want a person, if they're guilty of doing the things Kavanaugh has been accused of, to be absolutely nowhere near the highest court in the land. On the flip of that, you've also got a man who, under American law, is innocent until proven guilty, who has said over and over again, these claims are false, and I've worked really, really hard to put myself in a position to serve my country. And this guy is on the verge of either having his life completely torn apart, any semblance of a good name he's made for himself completely destroyed, or winding up with a tremendous amount of real tangible power over how Americans live their lives. Supreme Court's a little bit different. Supreme Court is unlike the vast majority of politicians I can think of in that the decisions they make really can affect how your day shakes out when you wake up in the morning. And with either side of this situation being a possibility, either he's an innocent man that's about to get tarred and feathered for something he didn't do, or he's a guilty man who is about to wind up with a ludicrous amount of power for anyone that is in any way, shape, or form guilty of any things that he's been accused of. Neither of these are good outcomes, which is why I believe the patriotic thing to do is to be sure to take time to respect America enough to know what the hell is up. Not force it through because it gives you a political advantage moving forward when it comes to your agenda. So there's that. I don't get it. I don't get the rush. What's the old expression? Measure twice, cut once. The Kavanaugh situation is a perfect example of how we want to measure as many times as it freaking takes. Because once he's there for life. It's a lifetime thing. And that's why this sort of thing surprises me. And by the way, this is just further affirmation to me that we want to be sure, we want to take our time. I mean, I sort of wonder why NBC would even air the interview. I mean, let me back up a little bit here. NBC admits before their Julie Swetnick interview that they weren't able to independently verify her claim and that there are things she told them on camera that are different from her written statements this past week just gone by. And Swetnick said, I can't specifically say that he, Kavanaugh, was one of the ones who assaulted me. And like I said, I kind of question why NBC would air the interview. So, money, rating, sorry. Forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking. I presumed integrity within the news media. Pshaw. Silly me. But why would you do it? Why would you air something if you have to put a disclaimer like this? In introducing the segment, Kate Snow said NBC News, for the record, has not been able to independently verify her claims. There are things that she told us on camera that differ from her written statement last week. We've been trying to independently reach out to anyone who remembers attending parties with Julie Swetnick and Brett Kavanaugh, and we've been asking her attorney for names. So far, we've not found anyone who remembers that. And you know, once the interview starts, turned out that Swetnick didn't remember when she came forward exactly. In a matter of moments, Swetnick goes from saying it was 6 weeks ago to saying it was a few weeks ago. Ford came forward September 16th, but if Swetnick seems unclear on when, she does remember why. She said she wanted to corroborate what Christine Ford had claimed. It's the type of inconsistency that even if you are completely anti-Kavanaugh, provided you want to do things right, provided you actually want justice, not just a momentary political advantage, you want to take a really hard look at. She said she wanted to corroborate what Ford had claimed. Like I said, bit of an alarming inconsistency with the interview. Swetnick claimed that she saw Kavanaugh getting handsy with female party guests, but when it comes to the claim that he spiked the punch at these parties, her story has kind of shifted a bit. In this interview, she claims that she saw Kavanaugh and Mark Judge near a punch bowl handing out red cups, but did not specifically say that she saw either man spike it. When asked point blank, she said, I don't know what he did. She told the story of her own assault as being violated by several men. And when she was asked if Kavanaugh was among them, she admitted, "I can't specifically say that he was one of the ones who assaulted me. But before this happened to me at the party, I saw Brett Kavanaugh there." Seeing someone there and having him take part in something like that are two entirely different things. She said, "If Brett Kavanaugh was one of those people that did this to me, then there's no way in the world that he should go scot-free on this and that he should be on the Supreme Court." Right. Agreed. I agree. If Brett Kavanaugh was one of the people at this party that sexually assaulted this woman, then he doesn't belong on the Supreme Court. And by the way, for people that are wondering where I lie on this one, well, here's the thing. I don't have a particular political allegiance, as you and I have discussed many, many times. And there's always people that go, "Oh, come on, AD. I know. I mean, underneath all of it, you've said some pretty conservative things. I know. You can tell me. You're a Republican, right?" And by the same token, I've had a lot of lefty friends go, "I mean, yeah, look at you. Come on. I mean, look at some of the things you've said. Look at some of the things you believe. You're clearly a liberal. I mean, you're a Democrat, right?" And you know what? I kind of sort of take that as a compliment. Means I can relate to anyone. Means I've done a good job at being unbiased. Means I've done a good job at being a cooler head that prevails. Means that I've done a good job at being a free thinker. If people have a hard time pinning me down politically, that's because, well, I take every single issue as it comes. But people have been pressing me for an impression on Kavanaugh with regard to guilt. Like I said, you want to be sure in these situations. With regard to him being a cooler head that prevails and deserves this type of authority, based on what we saw during his hearing, well, he didn't inspire a tremendous amount of confidence in me. That's a fair way of saying it, right? Yeah. And look, I'm trying to be fair. And lots of people have been asking. So there I've tipped my hand. Based on what I saw during the hearing, it didn't seem like he was made of the sternest stuff. But that's not the question here. The question is, can we be sure he did these things at this party? And that's a really big question mark hanging in the air, isn't it?
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, one of the somewhat disappointing aspects of the Kavanaugh testimony this past week just gone by was that, well, it left a lot of people with more questions than answers. However, one thing that was in no way, shape, or form up for debate, one thing that we could say with absolute certainty, one thing that became crystal freaking clear was what Kavanaugh drank and what Kavanaugh still likes to drink. In case you needed a reminder, here we go.
Drank beer with my friends. We drank beer, my friends and I. Sometimes I had too many beers. Yes, we drank beer. I liked beer, still like beer. We drank beer. In any event, we drank beer and still do. I think you've probably had beers, Senator. I liked beer. I still like beer. The calendars show a few weekday gatherings at friends' houses after a workout or just to meet up and have some beers. You ever played quarters? Sometimes probably had too many beers. We drank beer. We liked beer.
What do you consider to be too many beers?
I don't know. Whatever the chart says on your blood alcohol chart.
Now, I bring this up not so you can play the time-honored drinking game that people have come up with since this past week just gone by, where you drink a beer every time Kavanaugh says beer and you end up absolutely obliterated very quickly. I bring this up because today, Donald Trump weighed in on Kavanaugh's high school drinking, and it was a very, very interesting thing. As he often does in his more scintillating moments, Donald Trump managed to find a way to make Kavanaugh's drinking about himself. Have a listen.
It's one of my only good traits. I don't drink.
So if he did lie about his drinking, does that mean you'll pull his...
I don't think he did.
Okay.
Look, here's what. I'm just saying, I'm not a drinker. I can honestly say I never had a beer in my life, okay?
Right.
It's one of my only good traits. I don't drink. Whenever they're looking for something good, I say, I never had a glass of alcohol. I've never had alcohol. I've just, for whatever reason. Can you imagine if I had? What a mess I'd be. I'd be the world's worst. But I never drank, okay? But I can tell you, I watched that hearing, and I watched a man saying that he did have difficulty as a young man with drink. The one question I didn't ask is, how about the last 20 years? Have you had difficulty the last 20 years? Because nobody said anything bad about him in many, many years. They go back to high school. I graduated from high school, and I, while I did not drink, I saw a lot of people drinking. They'd drink beer and they'd go crazy, and, they were in high school. They were 16, 17 years old, and I saw a lot of it. Does that mean that they can't do something that they want to do with their life? So it's a very tough thing. I really believe that he was very strong on the fact that he drank a lot, and so I don't know where there'd be big discrepancy.
Okay, so
yes, go ahead, please.
Just to wrap up, can you promise
You've really had enough.
Report?
Hey, you've had enough. Go ahead, please.
Well, I tell you when I've had enough, to quote the great Bobby Hill. Here's the interesting thing about that. First and foremost, Donald Trump's not doing anything by saying he had a problem. Now, clearly, a 16, 17-year-old that's getting blitzed on a regular basis with their buddies, that's problematic because, well, I don't know where Kavanaugh was or what the drinking age was at the time, but look, when teenagers are getting plastered on a regular basis, this is problematic. But, Kavanaugh was sort of being everyman. Hey, what up? I like beer. Still like beer. What's wrong with beer? I drank beer. So what? It was almost like Kavanaugh rolled out the I drank beer thing purposefully so many times because he thought in some way, shape, or form it would give him a chance to bond with people. This makes me seem relatable. I like beer. Kind of like the whole thing where the politician that we talked about at the beginning of the show purported to be a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles when he couldn't name key members of their team. But what I thought was kind of interesting about this is, and you and I have talked about this a bit in the past, Donald Trump has never had a drink. But there's a reason for that. He had a brother that very sadly drank himself to death. And, well, that was his cautionary tale. He had an up-close and personal view of the havoc alcoholism could wreak on someone's life and how it could actually end someone's life. I think his brother was just, I want to say 43 years old when he eventually did drink himself to death. Horrible, horrible thing. Horrible thing for any young person, Trump or not, to see. And it'll definitely put you off drinking. But like I said, it's an interesting thing that Trump grew up around alcoholism. If you've ever been to an Al-Anon meeting, you know that there's people that realize, oh my gosh, I might have never touched a sip of liquor in my entire life. I might have never taken a drink. I might have never ingested any kind of alcohol, but I've been around this behavior and I've learned some of it. It's the expression a dry drunk. You ever heard that? Where you kind of pick up the behaviors of an alcoholic because even though you've never drank in your life, that's the environment you're in. And if you've ever had the great misfortune of having someone close to you who is an alcoholic, then you know, especially if you're a kid, especially if you're a young person, one of the most devastating aspects of it is the inconsistencies it causes in people's character. I mean, it's the old adage, didn't know which version of mom I was going to get, didn't know which version of dad I was going to get, didn't know which version of my brother I was going to get. Sometimes be the nicest, sweetest, kindest, most generous, giving person in the world. Other times be bitter, angry, hurtful. But the worst part was not knowing. It was the inconsistency. And man, it just reminds me so much of how Donald Trump goes through life. He's an incredibly inconsistent person. And I think he knows this about himself, and I think he uses it as a form of power and leverage. He understands that people are trying to gain his favor. People are trying to make him happy. People are trying to get the version of Donald Trump that you want. If you're Kim Jong-un, you don't want the one that's tweeting about how he's going to nuke you. You want the one that says, I've fallen in love with that guy. We're really getting along great. We've done incredible, incredible things. And I think Donald Trump is aware of his behavior. Maybe not aware that it could potentially have come from the background of someone that grew up around an alcoholic, but he's aware of it. But it's weird. The upshot of that is it keeps you, me, all of us, everyone in America, in some ways, everyone on the face of planet Earth, in a state of suspended terror. Where you're going to, what'd they do? What'd they say? What's going on? And there's times where he says and does everything that you would like a president to say and do. And there's times where you're absolutely freaking mortified. But I bring this up just because I think it's fascinating to point out that whether you love Trump or whether you're anti-Trump, we all sort of live in a world where we're going through life as though we have an alcoholic parent. Donald Trump's behavior is basically like every last one of us on earth having a volatile alcoholic as a father.
You walk these streets most every day. You waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So, there's a lot of people screaming and yelling about Kavanaugh's drinking, saying that in and of itself constitutes crime. A lot of people say it's what kids do. They drink underage. This is what we call a common crime. Well, it actually got me thinking about common crimes that you might have committed, that I might have committed. Over 150,000 people took an online poll about small crimes that everybody commits. And, well, the stats are kind of interesting. Like, how many of these crimes have you committed? We'll get into it a little later on in the show. Right now, though, let's take a look at the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. Okay, what is going on in the world? Big important things. So many big important things, like the fact that, oh yeah. Did you see this? Kim Kardashian said that she and Kanye West got into fights over Band-Aids recently. Yeah, Kim Kardashian and Kanye West have been fighting over Band-Aids. I would imagine it all started when she tried to put one over his mouth. Frankie Muniz, who played Malcolm from Malcolm in the Middle, recently praised Kanye West for his remarks about the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. Well, thanks, Frankie Muniz from Malcolm in the Middle. But when it comes to nuanced observations about the foundation of our country and the socio-political implications therein, I take my cues from Haley Joel Osment. Charlie Sheen is all sorts of upset with the IRS. Yeah, Charlie Sheen is upset with the IRS for not letting him pay off his $5.7 million tax debt in installments. They want it all at once. And if that doesn't beat all, they are a bunch of jackbooted thugs. It's the weirdest thing. It is the weirdest thing. The IRS is a very, very strange thing. I mean, of course, it would probably help if Charlie Sheen didn't offer to pay off in installments of cocaine, but it's still a very weird thing. I remember I was once this kid in a band, and we had the biggest of everything. We had managers that looked after Korn and Rob Zombie and Linkin Park, and at one point Mariah Carey. Yeah, it's strange having the same manager and producer and label as Mariah Carey and Celine Dion and being this punk-ass kid. But among the very biggest and the best that we had of absolutely everything, which we, by the way, paid dearly for in retrospect. It was all a huge mistake, but you're 19 years old and your manager goes, you're going to go with this financial advisor. I had one of the biggest and best financial advisors in the music business, and that would have been the same as I think Bruce Springsteen was the other big client that he had. Well, I say the other. I was not a big client. But as it turns out, Bruce Springsteen was a very big client, to the point where one year, I guess he was too busy counting the boss's bucks and forgot to carry the one on some of what I owed. So I'm blissfully unaware of some pretty serious tax discrepancies, or at least as serious as they can be when you're making as little money as I was. But I'm blissfully unaware of some reasonably serious tax discrepancies. And I'm also a person with no fixed abode. All my mail from the IRS was going to my accountant. I was living on the road. I was couch surfing. I was on tour. So I didn't get a whole bunch of letters that the IRS sent about, hey, something looks off here. You owe us money. Pay up. And eventually, when I did settle down, a couple years later, and kind of put a life together, I did get one of those letters from the IRS, and they were like, hey, this is our umpteen millionth attempt to contact you. Pay up. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you owe this much, and with penalties and interest, oh my gosh, I can't remember what the initial amount was, but it was something insane that I wound up owing. I think it was like a $2,600 tax bill. But by the time it caught up with me, thanks to penalties and interest, something that the IRS arbitrarily decided on their own, they're like, yeah, that seems fair. I was a kid in my very early 20s that suddenly owed $30,000. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I was like, this is more than I'll ever make in my entire life. I was not doing well at that time. I was trying to figure things out. I just started DJing. I was just trying to figure out how, after a life in music, which does not prepare you for pretty much any part of the real world, I was going to make ends meet. I was trying to figure all this stuff out. And the IRS said, we're going to come to your home and we're going to take everything that you have in it, except for one chair. And I called them up. I was like, you gotta help me. You gotta help me out in some way, shape, or form. If you came to my home, you wouldn't get anywhere near what this is worth. I live on a freaking futon. What are you going to do? Come after my collection of Mets t-shirts? Like eBay them? And there's absolutely nothing that I can do to make this right. You got to cut me a break. You got to give me a chance to pay this off. You got to, and they're like, no, we think you're young, you're productive, and you'll figure things out. But right now, we want our freaking money. And, well, fortunately, I was able to get the help of a tax professional that managed to get me into a fair and equitable situation with the IRS. But the IRS don't play around. And interestingly enough, the IRS, who operate on money that we pay with our taxes, for the most part, I mean, I was a couple $1,000s short that year, even though I had paid taxes. The way in which they arbitrarily decide how much they owe you, or how much you owe them, it's absolute insanity. If you've ever been through it before, you know. You've gotten those letters that say, we're going to take everything that you've got. Lots of luck. We're going to take, I'll never forget the way it was worded, we're going to take everything in your home except for one chair for you to sit down on. You don't get a bed anymore. You owe Uncle Sam money, and we're coming and collecting. Insane, right? Insane. So, in a weird sort of way, not that Charlie Sheen deserves a benefit of the doubt because of all the great decisions he's made in his life, but in a weird sort of way, I kind of sympathize with what's going on with Charlie Sheen at the moment. Yeah. Go figure. Who'da thunk it? Madonna has gone on the record saying that she'll release a new album in 2019. Wow. Madonna putting out a new album in 2019? Last week was the season premiere of NCIS, and now this. Great start to fall for your grandparents. Kevin Hart has gone on the record saying that he forgave his dad for being a drug addict. That takes a big man, so to speak. President Trump said, as we heard, that he's never tried alcohol. Which is probably good because, it's hard to find a wine that pairs well with KFC. I told a buddy of mine that voted for Trump that Donald Trump had never tried alcohol ever. And he's like, what, ever? I thought he decided not to drink. Really? No, he's never tried alcohol. And he's like, well, he's responsible for lots of people drinking it at the moment. I was like, you voted for Trump. He was like, yeah, I feel good about the decision. But we live in uncertain times, so I drink more. Interesting. Some members of the Trump administration are admitting that global temperatures are rising to alarming levels. Let me rephrase that. Former members of the Trump administration. Politicizing the weather, it's a whole other show in and of itself, and maybe we'll get to that sometime later on this week, because that's an interesting one. A Catholic minister at Cleveland State University was fired for liking a post about his liking a friend's post about his same-sex marriage. Yeah, Catholic minister at a Cleveland State University was fired for liking a friend's post about his same-sex marriage. Oh. So there is something that you can get fired for in the Catholic Church after all. Good to know. A gamer just beat Super Mario Brothers in world record time. Yet, when he woke up this morning, amazingly, still a virgin. Do we have time to talk about the common crimes that you may or may not have committed? We don't. You know what? It's an interesting one. We'll get into it tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you so much for hanging. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time that you and I spend together, best part of my day, every single day. Have yourself a great night. Hey, what's up? It's AD. So this is what I love so much about San Diego County Credit Union. They're real people. They're like you and I. They're living right here in San Diego. So they get it. They get that we live in America's finest city. We do not live in America's most affordable city. So for that reason, San Diego County Credit Union just wants to help you keep more cash in your pocket and help you live your best San Diego life. Like this weekend during the SDCCU Biggest Used Car Sale, October 6th and 7th at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, you can get rates as low as 2.99% APR on over 600 used cars, trucks, and SUVs. Plus, I love this. It's no haggle pricing. Everything's going to be clearly marked. Parking and barbecue? Well, that, my friend, is free. Subject to approval, APR's annual percentage rate, 2.99% APR valid at the sale. Only for details, call 877-SDCCU for you or visit SDCCU.com.